24 minutes past 9 o'clock now. Every fortnight, Nazareen Ebrahim joins us for her Tech Talk and unpacks what's happening in the world of tech, IT, and of course, artificial intelligence. Quite interesting that we were talking about infidelity in an earlier conversation. This week, we talk about online snooping, digital tracking, and phone etiquette around your partner. When we talk about snooping and digital tracking, we don't mean by, some clandestine government department or some sinister corporate. We're talking about by our partners, by our friends, maybe even sometimes by our companies. Nazareen Ebrahim joins us on the line from Johannesburg. Thanks very much for joining us, Nazareen. Snooping on each other's phones. I found out recently that I could track every single spot I had been to during the course of the day. I was in North America, and I wanted to just check, could I figure out how far I've walked? And of course, there's pedometers on your phone. But then I figured out that if I go through my Google and I sort of reverse Google and I go to my maps, there's a way that I can track my exact movements during the course of the day. And this could be a little bit uncomfortable when you think of relationship scenarios, when I tell my wife, no, I'm coming right home and I'll be right home. But instead I just popped over to the pub or to a mate's, just for a drink. It could be quite dangerous.
Esther, it's nice to talk to you again. Infidelity and technology, I think, have evolved humans to a whole different level of paranoia. I am certain. Many of the third-party tracking apps all promote themselves under the guise of being aware of your family, promoting family safety. But I think that takes the tracking to a whole other level, where you share the example of being able to look at the history of your location by going into your Google account. Now, if you think about the tracking ability online, you can think about it in three different parts. The first would be a service-operated tracking ability, which is something like Google service. You need a single ID, and you can track via your Google ID. You've then got the actual device tracking operations, which is something like Find My iPhone with your iOS, or you've got Samsung's Find My Mobile, and with Android, you've also got a built-in Android function to be able to track your phone. Then you've got third-party applications. So the ways and means for people to implement tracking with or without someone's permission is so very simple these days. But as you say, I think it's down to a person's, what could I say, the moral centeredness that they have around wanting to track someone and why.
Look, there's also the argument, if I'm being totally honest and I've nothing to hide, why should I worry about my partner who has my Google password? Or sometimes you don't even need the password. Our Gmails are probably permanently open on our laptops, and we just close our laptop, and you just need someone to get into your laptop, open up your Gmail. It connects automatically, and you can go from there. But leaving an electronic paper trail is nothing new. It's coming on for decades now, ever since the banking services, offered you SMS banking, and you got a notification wherever you made a transaction or a transaction over a certain amount. And if anyone has your phone, they could just go into your SMSs, scroll through there and see where you've been making purchases and what you've been actually buying, even online or even in real life.
I know it's, forgive me, it leaves me right now what it stands for, but SABRIC, which I think is a South African banking research institute, if I'm not mistaken, released also earlier this year statistics around data breaches, or how to protect yourself from being scammed because of online banking. And it's interesting to just before we can have this conversation, much earlier in the day, I saw a promoted tweet from SABRIC talking about how to protect yourself from being scammed by one-time PINs as well as the spam emails that you are getting. So this interconnectedness that you're talking about, leaving your devices unattended, leaving accounts that you have, because remember, we can use one ID for multiple accounts that are linked. As an example, a Google service. Your Google ID, mine would be sociallyacceptableZA@gmail.com. And that tracks everything from my maps to the Google Analytics, on the website, off the company website, down to my Gmail, and lots of other Google services that I'm using. And then I had to stop myself and think, giving access, because of course, since we've established company email addresses to deal with specific things, but this was set up in the early days, and it just tracks everything. So it's not just my personal life in terms of the location tracking. You could go into YouTube and look at the saved videos or look at the video history. It gives you a complete sense of who I would be as a person. So
look, you also have to be concerned about on what email address you are logged in. In the other company that I work for, they use a Google-based email server. So I have to sort of be very wary and vigilant on what account I'm logged in on my phone, because I could be making whatever Google searches, in my personal capacity, whether it be honest, dishonest, or nefarious or naughty. And I should be wary on which server I'm doing it on, whether it's on my own personal Gmail account or whether it's on my work account, because the IT guys can go in. I could be thinking I'd be doing this on lester.kivett@gmail.com, but I could be doing it at lesterk at whatever company I'm working for.
So you made a very important point, Lester, and I think generally us as humans, because we're so used to using one device, and for the ease of use, want to rely on one ID that will assist us with securing the phone, accessing multiple apps, going into our emails, accessing different communication platforms, that it's very easy to forget the ability for you to be found out through your browsing history, through your location history, through social messaging, and other online activity that you perform, can be through a various number of ways. One is through your IP address. The other is through private networks, which are held within companies, as you say, on a server. The other could be if you decide that you wanted to transact using a public Wi-Fi, as an example, and many people don't realize this. Using a public Wi-Fi can be okay if you just need to quickly look up a number, call someone via WhatsApp, but can be very dangerous if you want to do much more sensitive work, because that network is not protected or secured as you would be if you used a private data connection or a private network in your home or your office. So being able to track, yes, of course, companies would want to gain access to employees' devices, especially if the bring your own device movement is not apparent in the company, and they've issued you a device. Know that that device should be used for work only. And of course, if you are, working according to the principles of what you've signed on your contract, then know that if they've said that you're going to be tracked, then chances are you will be, because many of these apps run in stealth mode. Stealth mode meaning that if a parent or an employer has put this app onto your phone, which is what also makes it a bit scary if you have a significant other who has tendencies towards being anything other than trusting of you, can simply take your device a maximum of 1 minute to 2 minutes to download the thing. It then runs, the icon for the app is hidden away out of sight. A person that can't easily find it on their screen of apps. So it runs in the background, uses less battery, won't show up any notifications, and you won't know unless you actually ask someone to look through, or you figure out someone has your Google email address as an example, your Google password for that, and then can simply log in and look through. Do you remember the series called You on Netflix?
You?
It's called You, Y-O-U.
Oh, okay.
It is a scary, realistic portrayal of how a person can actually be stalked. And the guy, Penn Badgley, the Hollywood actor who played Dan Humphrey in Gossip Girl. I think that's why all of us watched it, because we love Dan Humphrey. But I would encourage listeners to watch at least the first episode. It's scarily real how he tracks this girl.
Talking about devices and gadgets, I know of a personal story of someone that I knew. They wanted to get a tracker, a car tracker. And their boyfriend had offered to do it for them, and he said he's going to take it to whatever auto electrician or some car company that does it. Instead, he went to a gadget shop one of these spy shops that are around, and he got a device that connects to an application on his phone. So while telling her, like, oh, you can use this device, it's great, and here's the application, she didn't know that he also had the application downloaded on his phone. So she thinks she's peace of mind. She knows she can track herself and, use that as maybe for security purposes. She didn't know that her boyfriend could also track her at the same time.
I am not sure how to answer this question, Lester, whether it should be
you must say
a formal answer or one of a concerned human being who wants to alert the person who was tracked in the first place. I think this answer comes from a place of just general human behavior, advising on general human behavior. I specifically would know that it would be nice to ask, I would say, a telecoms engineer particularly. Be nice to get one of those guys and ask them particularly how to break, or not even jailbreak your phone to understand what devices are running in stealth mode if you can't locate them initially, but also to have an understanding of how to track the apps that are on your phone.
That's very important.
I think it would be important because, there are a number of apps that are available both for Android and iOS. Some of them are things like Prey, Lookout, Spizy, Glimpse, Flexi Spy, FamiSafe. These all go on the guise of wanting to track your significant other or your family for the purposes of being safe. Yeah. I would think as a phone user that I would want to track my apps by looking at the most downloaded apps I have under my particular account or ID associated with my device. If it's in stealth mode, I would then be very encouraged to go into your nearest device manufacturer store, like as an example, a Huawei help center, and seek this advice on how to be able to understand if you are being tracked, what are the steps to take on that. But I think a person who will be able to guide us on that is definitely a mobile tech engineer or a telecoms engineer. I would be very keen myself to understand that because I don't want to be tracked.
Or a spy. Sure. But here's a great question from Bev on the WhatsApp line. And she asks, do these security principles apply when customers use the computers to go online inside the bank? Is that the risk? And that is very important. We were speaking just last week of how artificial intelligence, how automation is essentially making jobs in banks particularly obsolete, that it's all self-service, that you go to these counters where you self-service, service yourself and go online. This happened to me recently. I wanted to do something on my bank. I wanted to speak to a teller, but before I even got there, the lady who gives you the ticket slip with your number, she says, no, sir, let's go to the computers here and we'll do it right here. How safe is that? And I guess it also depends on how sure you are that you've actually logged out of your account in that respect.
Absolutely. Now, this comes down to proper consumer or user behavior. The question was, are you certain that you're not being tracked in a bank? Or what are you doing in the bank that you will be tracked? The only thing you can do in a bank is to be able to transact within their environment or their system. Naturally, everything that you do is tracked in terms of the login, the security checks that they will do to check that the correct person is logging in, asking you for your ID number, maybe doing a facial recognition or biometric scan, whatever 2 or 3 step authentication verification processes they may have, like you would on your device. That's what's going to happen in that controlled environment. So I know as a person who uses multiple channels to bank, both online, to do online shopping, there are multiple mechanisms that I would use to ensure security and safety. So in a controlled environment like a bank, of course, there will be a certain amount of tracking for the security purpose to ensure the protection of one's account. But also the AI side then serving the customer is a different, I would say, conversation, because these systems are now designed to serve you information that's readily available. So you can ask a question like, what is my balance today? And that system can easily serve that because it's something that's easily acquired and can be presented immediately. There's no deeper back-end processing that needs to process an answer or a decision, rationalize that, and then serve it back to you. That would take much more time, I imagine, like a legal proceeding would be, as an example. So I would think to the lovely lady who asked the question, was it Bev you said? I think to understand it in that context is just about working in a different controlled environment as opposed to an uncontrolled, suspicious environment.
Nazareen Ebrahim, she's the CEO of Socially Acceptable. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll talk to you again in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Lester. I'm looking forward to it.
If you want to read more of some of Nazareen's work, just go to sociallyacceptable.co.za. All things tech, all things IT, all things artificial intelligence.